And I'm very glad to have Alex Nitzberg with us today. Alex one time was my intern, one of the smartest young men that I have ever known, a great dispensational thinker and a great thinker as it relates to our society. He's working in journalism now. He is a contributing writer for newsbusters.org. Alex, welcome to our program today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Dr. White. It's great to be here.
We're glad that you're with us from your home in Florida. And today we're starting a new segment on Ask the Theologian, and we're going to ask the newsman, the journalist, Alex Nitzberg, the conservative journalist, one in a sea of liberalism. And we're glad that today you're going to help us, because I would like to talk about the media promotion of the LGBT agenda and this issue, which they seem to have, of a lack of absolutes, especially as it relates to LGBT. What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, exactly. The media is promoting the LGBT agenda, which is interesting. Specifically, the news media is what I want to talk about, because a lot of people have been talking about Beauty and the Beast and the issue with that lately. And most people are familiar with the fact that Hollywood, is liberal and they're promoting liberal causes. But it's interesting that the news media seems to be promoting the LGBT agenda. And basically, with the gay marriage ruling on the books, it seems that the homosexual movement has moved on to this new frontier. And their new frontier is promoting transgenderism and this idea of a plurality of genders, or sometimes they call it a gender spectrum. And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and the idea of a gender spectrum is just would be totally foreign to anyone, even just a few years ago, because a few years ago we had a dichotomy of genders. We had male and female, and of course that goes back to the scripture. Male and female created he them. I guess it's no surprise that our world wants to take the scripture and twist it and turn it and stretch it and do away with it. Is the media in this, first of all, if you know anything about what is the spectrum of gender now, and is the media consistent in its use of rejecting specific dichotomies like this, or other areas in which there are certain categories that one can go in? Has the media given that on all fronts, or just in the LGBT agenda?
Well, first of all, in the contrived world of gender identities, it's this idea of gender identity. And then basically, in the world of gender identity, a boy can be a girl can be a boy, or you can be a combination of both or something in between. It really just seems to be nearly unlimited, which is probably why some people call it a spectrum, like a spectrum. There's a point on the spectrum, or perhaps even outside of the spectrum. And a lot of the times it's framed as a civil rights issue by the homosexual LGBT movement. But we know it's not a civil rights issue because, for instance, skin color is an immutable characteristic. So that's a civil rights issue. LGBT lifestyles are behaviors, they're choices, they're lifestyles. So it's not really a civil rights issue. However, when you're asking me, is the media being consistent? This is something interesting. Rachel Dolezal was the woman who was white who actually said that she identifies as Black. And she's come out and she's identifying, I believe she's calling it trans Black. So I don't know if it's going to catch on, but she seems to be promoting this idea of trans race, like you choose your race almost. So that doesn't necessarily, I saw reports about that. The media is not necessarily promoting that, but I saw them talking about it. So that's something interesting. But in general, skin color is an immutable characteristic. You can't, if you're Black, you're Black. If you're white, you're white. That's not like the LGBT movement, because we know that those are behaviors, lifestyle choices. So it's not a civil rights issue.
Yeah, very good point. And I think I've been studying just recently John Dewey, who had such a huge effect on public education then and today. And Deweyism was basically that there is no absolute. There's no absolute truth. It all has to do with how it interacts with you and the meaning rather than the truth. And I think this is Deweyism to its full degree. He would be very proud. And of course, it has taken generations of teaching this in public schools in order to bring about a society that would actually accept it. That was something, again, just a few years ago even would have been rejected, but now it's there. So tell us, Alex, if you would, about media promotion of the LGBT agenda. What are you seeing out there?
Okay, well, the first thing I wanted to mention is NBC Out. Okay, NBC.com, NBCnews.com. They actually have a special section on their website called NBC Out. And I call it, it's basically the LGBT propaganda arm of NBC News. Because if you get on the website, it talks about LGBT issues. It's just a special section on NBCnews.com. In fact, the mission on, they have a Facebook page for NBC Out, a Twitter page, an Instagram page, and then they have a special section on NBCnews.com. On the Facebook page, it tells you the mission of NBC Out. It says mission is, quote, elevating the conversation of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender life and culture in the United States and abroad. Now, that doesn't sound like an objective news organization that's just, telling, stories. So, and when you look at it, it seems to have a pretty much a pro-LGBT slant on the articles. And so that's interesting that NBC has a special section, NBC Out, writing about LGBT topics. And then the second thing I wrote about this.
For dispensationalists also, don't they? NBC Dispensational?
Yeah, they don't have that. They do have a section called NBC Black, and it's actually like BLK, NBC BLK, and I believe they have NBC Asian America and maybe one other one. So they have a few segmentations like that, but NBC Out is the one promoting LGBT topics. And then CBS just recently, okay, CBS has this thing online called CBSN. It's like an online streaming news type thing. It's kind of like a channel that's just streaming CBS type news, but it's different than the one on TV. But CBSN just had a CBSN originals documentary, and it was called Gender, the Space Between. Okay, this is supposed to be a documentary on a thing affiliated with a news organization. There is no space between. It's called Gender, the Space Between. What space between? That's not reporting, news. That's reporting on the LGBT movement. And a couple of the tweets that were advertising this before it came out. Let's see. They had a tweet that said, transgender is just the beginning, advertising this before it came out. They had another tweet that said, when you don't identify with being a man or a woman, it can be a long journey to understanding your gender identity. And basically, I didn't watch this entire thing. I watched part of it. I watched the previews. I wrote about it before it actually came on. I wouldn't recommend anybody watch it because the parts I saw, there was some lewd material. I just wouldn't recommend anyone watch it. But the parts that I saw and the articles they wrote in advance to advertise it, it doesn't look like it's going to have any negative view on the LGBT movement. It looks like it's going to portray sympathetic people, and it's going to be sort of a pro-LGBT documentary telling you how these people feel and how they, so that was interesting. And then the third thing I want to mention is the ABC recently had a series called We Will Rise, and I didn't watch the series, but Newsbusters, the organization that I contribute articles to, they had an article about it, and in their article it said, quote, ABC's 8-hour gay propaganda event. Okay, so they had, I think it was a multi-day, multi-hour thing that had to do, at least in some part, with the LGBT movement. And of course, we also know there's TV shows, like fictional shows like NBC Superstore, and so all that. But this, I'm talking about news. And the last thing I want to mention, there is actually a National Gay Lesbian Journalist Association, or maybe it's National Lesbian and Gay Journalist Association. It's NLG, they have an acronym. Anyway, they have an event coming up this April, I believe it's April 20th. And some of the sponsors that are currently listed, and there could be more before it actually happens, but some of the sponsors currently listed for this event include CNN, Comcast Universal, which owns NBC, CBS, and the New York Post. And back in 2015, the same National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association had an event back in 2015, and Fox News Channel was listed as one of the sponsors. And there's different levels of sponsorship. But even organizations like Fox News that are more conservative have been involved in promoting the LGBT agenda.
Yeah, that LGBT agenda is one of the most powerful movements, it seems, agenda movements in our society. They have organized well and funded well from George Soros and others. They're leftist and completely godless agenda, because there has to be just a complete rejection of Scripture in order to carry out this genderless society, which of course gets into so many areas of bathrooms and marriage and on and on and on. The implications of this thing that go on are amazing. Well, thank you for bringing us up to date. We're glad to have the Alex Nitzberg Minute here, Alex, and look forward to having you again next week on Ask the Theologian.
Well, thank you, Dr. White. I look forward to seeing you next week.
And God bless you.
You too.